Welcome to EmComm Solutions. Jake here, back from a little hiatus. Might be some minor disruptions. We'll get into that in a future video, but I am back in Europe and we're trying to push forward to, or I am trying to push forward to, with producing regular content again. Today we're going to talk EmComm or emergency communications and not overthinking the whole term itself or the terminology behind it. It is a part of the whole emergency communication or emergency preparedness ecosystem. Tends to be one of the ones maybe a little more overlooked by individuals, but for some reason there's some that tend to really overthink the term and who it applies to, right? Whether you're using disaster comms, crisis comms, backup comms, EmComm, or emergency communications, it is just a term used to help describe this. And EmComm itself is really used as a single standardized term in the technical and operational context, particularly in the amateur radio and emergency response professionals, or in many cases, the prepared citizen. Therefore, terminology used is less important than the methods and processes employed to build and drill a robust communications plan. For example, a good base goal of a prepared citizen's communications plan should be having multiple layers, or PACE, as a lot of us like to use, primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency. So when there is communications infrastructure disruptions, they occur, right? We see it on a regular basis. You have the ability to communicate with those in your group, family, or community, whoever it is your goals, or who you're trying to communicate. The simple fact is, in many disaster situations, especially large-scale ones, our first responders cannot help everyone at once. Therefore, you can't rely on the ability to be able to call for 911 and have help arrive in a timely manner. You should plan for self-rescue. Being a prepared citizen or an independent individual that has resiliency, self-sufficiency built into their lives is going to help those first responders focus on those that need it the most, that cannot assist themselves. Math doesn't lie here. The number of first responders that are available during disasters, especially, like I said, a large-scale disaster, does not equate to how many people that may need assistance immediately. So help them by helping yourself, right? So the end state here is community support, helping be a part of that community approach in the emergency management world, whether that's your county, state, city, federal emergency management. That's why they push campaigns like, having a plan, having emergency supplies. And a part of having emergency supplies, they usually recommend having a little radio, battery powered, crank radio, solar radio, whatever, with extra batteries or extra power sources so that you can receive information. One of the things we tend to overlook in this space, especially if we're one of those individuals that live in a major metro area with ease of access to information or critical information like stable internet and phone service. Well, the FCC, there's been several reports, but the FCC says around 19 million. Some actually say that number is close to 25 million Americans do not have access to high-speed internet. And we're not talking whether or not they can afford it, financially. We're talking it's not actually available where they reside. So, and then on top of that, FCC also reported in 2016 that there's about 1.4 million Americans that have no access to 4G LTE cellular coverage. So take that into context. Those individuals that live in areas without that, they don't even have the option of adding that into a PACE plan or layers of their communications plan. So you may be able to use a cell phone as your primary, and an alternate is, some sort of radio or your internet, because say, not always when you have a localized power disruption, in your community, you may also have, if you have backup power for your routers at your home, you may still have internet. Now maybe the cellular service is not working in your area, so now you can move to your internet as a form of communications if you're at home, right? So those are things we must consider, and once again, not overthinking it. You know, a base plan here is, if you know, how does your first responders, how does your government agencies within your community alert you of a disaster? You know, it could be through a mass notification through your cell phones, but if you don't have cell phone access, you're not going to receive that. It could be you hearing from a neighbor. It could be the county police or county sheriffs, you know, driving around neighborhoods with their PAs announcing there's an evacuation order because there's a wildfire headed towards your community. Those are ways you receive information, but how do you communicate with others to relay that information? How do you communicate with a neighbor that lives, you know, or a friend or family member that lives 4 or 5 miles away? How do you, you know, realistically, how do you communicate with those that you love or those that you want to communicate with? That's why you need to build a communications plan. That's where emergency communications, or EmComm, whatever term you want to use, comes into play for the average citizen. Yes, amateur radio operators, especially those that volunteer for organizations like ARES or RACES or any of those other ones, have a role that they might play with the local government, with the police or fire, to assist them. And then your first responders have their own system, and then the federal level has its own system. I'll provide some links for this information that I received down below, but it's, you have to apply it to you and your situation, trying to apply what, you know, the definition of emergency communications or backup communications applies to first responders, to individuals, is usually not realistic. That's why you have to apply it to yourself to be a better and more prepared citizen. So this in the end state here really pulls into that whole community approach, you being less of a burden, you being able to help yourself, assist your neighbors, assist your community when those first responders and volunteers are trying to assist and come into a community and they don't have enough people, or there's obstructions on the roadways so they can't get to you immediately. You being able to communicate and assist that local area reduces burden on them. So they should appreciate it. I would hope they would appreciate it. You and your family and your friends and your community probably appreciate it more than anyone else, right? So, all right, so that's going to pretty much wrap it up. If you have any questions, you have something you want to add, please add it in the comments down below. Check out our social media links, website, and much, much more down in the comment section or the description section. Thanks for watching.